Hello, welcome to this webinar, which is giving you an update on the Afghan refugee crisis here at Lutheran Community Services Northwest. We're extremely happy to have you here to share this great information with you all. And so please sit back, write down questions as you have them. We are in webinar mode. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little Q&A box. If you click on that and submit your questions that way, that is the best and easiest way for us to get all of your questions seen and answered in a good period of time. As we talk today, we'll have some chat messages that will also pop up in that chat box. And it'll have a little bit of additional information, maybe contact information that you might need or be curious about. If you're not new to webinars, thank you so much for joining us. We're thankful you've been along with us for this journey and everything that we've been able to accomplish this past year. Many of you have supported us fiscally or with in-kind donations this past year, and we are incredibly thankful for that support. We would not be able to do the things that we're doing currently without you, and we aren't able to continue moving forward without you either. So we're grateful you're here to gain more information, and we're also deeply thankful for all the support you've provided thus far. We have an amazing panel lined up to update us all on what's happened this past year. As we know, if you've attended some of our other webinars or have tuned into the news at all, it's been a little bit over a year ago that there was this swift US military withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that created a great deal of chaos. Within that, we started receiving Afghan refugees in the US as they were fleeing to safety about 2 months after that withdrawal happened. The people that you will hear from today have had an integral part in making sure that those people are welcomed here, seen, valued, and are hopefully starting off a wonderful life here in the US. First, we're going to hear from Asifash, who is the Associate District Director for our Multicultural Community Services Program. I'm going to hand it over to you, Asifash.
Thank you, Carrie, for the introduction. Hello, my name is Asifash Melis. I am the Associate District Director at MCS. I want to take a moment and ask everybody to imagine with me, just take a few minutes. I promise you it's not going to be too long. Imagine flying across the world to a new land where when you know no one, language, customs, food, and dress, everything in this strange place is different. How you communicate with your doctor, take the bus, buy groceries, cook, all of your routine habits now require careful consideration, a lot of brain space. You might just get a job quickly to survive. Perhaps you're a prominent professional in your home country, but menial work is now the only option that you have. Imagine, or you might have to find a job and you had no education and even able to read or write in your language because you were not allowed to. Add another layer to that. You came from a place that war is rampant and you've witnessed terrible violence. You and your family were persecuted and driven away from your home, your livelihood, your culture, your community, and traveled great distance to find safety, to find a new home. What would you do? Lutheran Community Services Northwest is a 3-state agency with a mission of partnering with individuals and families like these families that we just talked about for hope, justice, for health, justice, and hope. We've been helping refugees and immigrants become self-sufficient since the mid-70s through refugee resettlement, multicultural behavior services, crime victim advocate, immigration counseling, and much more. Taking a look back at this last year, thinking about what happened in this refugee work, which had to shift to serve this community that we're talking about. What made the Afghan refugee unique is that they arrived without without knowing where in the US that they were going to be resettled, unlike people with official refugee status who walked off the plane with clear pathways to a green card to reunite with their family left behind. The timing of the crisis, the Afghan exodus, hit at a time when American refugee agencies had been sharply downsized under the previous administration, and the number of refugees accepted had plunged to a record lows. The current administration has pushed to reinvigorate refugee programs, but immigration experts caution that the resettlement of people seeking safety in the States has always been a long game, and Afghans will be arriving to this country for years to come. Lutheran Community Services as a wraparound service to provide support for our new arrivals. Community-based mental health services is one of the critical pieces. We have moved from the traditional clinical care model and moved to a community-based population health-focused integrated model. We transformed our care model to become tri-disciplinary with providers at all levels who speak the language of the clients. We also have school support for families with children that provide services to refugees, age school eligible enrollees to strengthen their academic performance and social adjustment. Assist their parents to understand the US school requirements and up to a year from arrival. We have a robust parenting support program, which supports families to parent their children in from their own cultural background. And we partner with them to strengthen the support that may have been impacted by trauma during this difficult journey. We have individual group process and integration work. All our work is provided around the issue of self-sufficiency and provide case management services up to a year. Family and individual mentorships, the key piece of this is connecting our families, our newcomers with American families who are mentors. But the main issue right here is the bidirectional learning that happens to support integration of our community members. Thank you.
Asafash, thank you so much for sharing not only that extremely humbling imaginary experience with us, but helping to put us in the shoes and think intentionally about what the people we're helping are going through. We haven't experienced that ourselves. I deeply appreciate that. It's been phenomenal seeing not the one-toned approach for people who are arriving at LCS&W that is wraparound, and that there are many facets to who we are as people, and we try to come in and support every facet of that person or those people in that family. So thank you so much for sharing that, Asfash. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Daryl, and Daryl is the Director of Refugee Resettlement for our multicultural services. And he is located primarily in our Tacoma office, physically, I should say, in our Tacoma office. We're excited to hear from Daryl to give us an on-the-ground update as well.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you what our work has been over the past year. So our job, my team's job, is we carry out the contract with the State Department. They send us refugees, and we have a contract to provide services primarily for the first 90 days after we arrive, to help them get on their feet to the extent that we can. Arrivals have been huge. over this past year. The Pacific Northwest has gotten a lot of the Afghans who've been coming from overseas. Our Portland office this year has served 233 Afghans. This is the federal fiscal year, which starts on October 1st and ends September 30th. So over that 1 year period, Portland served 233, Vancouver 170, and in Puget Sound area, we resettle people in Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties, mainly those 3 counties. It's a huge area. We had over 651 Afghans coming. So the total was well over 1,000 people that just our organization helped to resettle of Afghans in this area. Just to put that in perspective, all refugee arrivals from all countries that we served in the previous year, fiscal year 2021, was 316 for all 3 sites, for Portland, Vancouver, and the Tacoma Puget Sound area. Whereas this year, and I saw someone in the chat was asking about Ukrainians as well. So this number includes Ukrainians as well. We served 1,472, over 4 times the numbers of refugee clients that we were providing services for, over 4 times the previous year's number. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what those services mean, the contract that we have with the State Department is very specific. There's certain things that we need to do to make sure that these people are on their feet to the extent possible. The goal of the whole program is self-sufficiency. That's sort of our key word. We want people to be able to take care of themselves as soon as possible. Of course, 90 days is a very short time. Or as I like to say, we want them to become self-reliant within the context of a supportive community. And the supportive community means all of us working together to help them. So the services, some of those services that we provide in the first 90 days are, we make sure there's a house prepared for them, if possible, so that when they're here, we can take them to a place that's ready. It's got furniture, it has kitchen things that they need to cook, has some food there for them, so that they have a place to call home immediately upon arrival in ideal situations. Before they arrive, if they have a U.S. tie, if they have a family member or a distant relative even who's here, we contact that person and we work together to say, what can you help your family with and what will we need to help your family with? Then we go to the airport, we pick them up, we bring them to the place that's prepared for them. And there are a series of home visits that are required, especially the first one begins the day after arrival, and that begins the orientation to their new home. There's regular case manager visits to make sure that they're being taken to connect with public services, to connect with the healthcare that they need, their initial visit with a doctor. And that begins the orientation process to the new community in the US. This is completely different from the culture they've grown up in, the one they've known all of their lives. So it's a very long process. And the sooner that we can get started on helping them to make that mental and emotional transition, the better. We help them apply for public services, SNAP, food stamps, TANF, that's temporary aid for needy families. That's our cash assistance program, Medicaid, so there's some health insurance, and many other things, ESL classes, school enrollment for children, job search. We do a lot of connecting with services that go beyond those initial 90 days. There's been some big challenges. As I said, the numbers that we've been asked to serve this year has been incredible. And it's put a big, it was a big challenge for our staff, especially after growing 4 times from the previous year. One of the biggest challenges is housing. It's just, most American families, if we have, we can live in a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom place, but we're receiving families that have 8, 9, 10, 11 or more people in their families. And we need to find 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom residences, sometimes even 6-bedroom residences. That's really hard. We're in cooperation and competition with other resettlement agencies. There are 4 other agencies in Washington state alone, and they're all looking to find housing. So it's been a big scramble to find places where these people can live. Renters, property management, they're very reluctant to rent to people who have no rental history, no credit history, no work history in the US. And so we have to establish relationships with property management, with renters, with property owners to say, yes, these refugees, work with us to help us find a place for these people to live, and that they will get their rental history and their work history. So as I said, ideally, we try to have a place prepared for people when they come. We pick them up at the airport, we take them, but that hasn't been possible because of the huge number of arrivals. So just for example, in the Tacoma Puget Sound area in August and September, we had over 230 individuals that we needed to find housing and provide services for. And that was just, it was impossible to prepare them beforehand. So we've had to put people in hotels, or we've put them with host families, people in the community who've been very kind and opened their homes to these families. But when they're in the hotels, the very limited amount of funding we get from the federal government has been running out. And it's been a real struggle. So the support, the donations from people like you has been crucial for us to be able to implement this program, to carry out the services to help these people adjust and get settled in life in America. Now, this month, the situation's improving a bit in terms of number of arrivals. We've had, I think in the 3 sites, we've had over 50 people. So it's not the huge numbers that we were having in August and September, but it's still significant. And we still have a significant number of large families who are living in hotels. And we're working as fast as we can to get them into housing that is appropriate for their family size. One of the other challenges is people are arriving and they've had a lot of misinformation overseas about what services they're going to get here, what to expect in America. Most of them have never been here. So some of them are expecting that we'll provide their rent for 6 months or more, or a year. They're expecting that the place they're going to get is going to be perfect. It's going to be, we see some what they consider perfect housing. Many of them think if it's on the first floor, it's not good. So if we find a first floor apartment, they're rejecting it. If there are too many homeless people around, they're rejecting it. If the house is too old, they're rejecting it. If it's too far from their US tie, and too far in their minds means a 10 to 20 minute drive, whereas for us in the Pacific Northwest, that's close. They're expecting free computers and cell phones and TVs, and this is not in our government contract. The government gives us a specific amount of money for each arrival, whether they're 2 months old or 99 years old. We get the same amount of money, and it's not a lot. It's enough, barely enough, to carry out these basic services we have. And so anytime, as you know, computers and cell phones, even TVs, these are kind of necessities in today's world, but that's not part of our contract with the government. And that's not what we have funds to pay for unless we get assistance from the community. And then the last one family was very upset because they had seen pictures of another family being greeted with flowers at the airport. Our case manager didn't bring flowers, so they were quite upset with him. Just one story. All right, so how do we meet those challenges? A lot of it is education. A lot of the people who are coming did not get the cultural orientation that they should have gotten in a more normal and more reasonably paced time for arrivals. They didn't get it in Qatar or wherever they're coming from. So we have to start helping them to modify those expectations. This is what we can really provide, and these are your responsibilities. Our goal is your self-sufficiency. So you have a part to play in this. So we just began doing in-person CO, that's cultural orientation classes. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to do that for over 2 years now. We've just held 2 classes. I'm doing them on Sundays. The first class had 25 attendees, all Afghan men. So we're contractually obligated to provide it to all of the adults. So we're looking for a way to make sure that the wives are getting cultural orientation as well. But just to give you an idea of the level of misinformation, there are 15 CO topics, all of them important. In that first session, we covered 1 of those topics in 4 hours. It was supposed to be a 2-hour session. And that topic was the role of the resettlement agency. What can you expect from us? And what are your responsibilities in your resettlement process? And it took a long time to help them think through what it means for them to be here and to start living in America and to make it a success here. And also we're developing our housing network, which was largely dismantled over the past several years because of the low number of refugee arrivals. That's what I have to share. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daryl. We appreciate you sharing all of the things that we are able to do, some of the challenge that we have ahead of us, and the things I'm thinking about. These are the random things that go through my mind. We don't know each other very well, but now you're going to know is like, how many sets of dishes does a family of 13 need? I have a family of 4, and I'm assuming we need more than that to make their household feel like a home. So thank you for helping to paint some of that picture as well, and highlighting those challenges around housing and communication overall. Seems to be a challenge with this large influx of refugees arriving to LCS&W. The piece that provides me so much hope and joy is all the extra services and extra things that we are able to provide because of LCS&W donors and supporters. So that's something that it warms my heart to be able to have kind of those extra pushes and extra key pieces because of people like you. So thank you for that if you've been participating with us in that way. I do want to have you keep in mind that we are in a webinar mode. So it means that you can't talk to us, unfortunately, person to person, but we do have the Q&A function opened. So as you're listening to our speakers today, feel free to throw questions in that Q&A function. And then at the end, we're going to come back and kind of divide and conquer who should answer it, who is best equipped to answer the questions that you provide for us. So please feel free to put questions in there. And we're going to keep moving forward. Next up, we have Alma, and he's the district director for our, get ready for it, it's kind of long, Immigration Counseling and Advocacy Program. I'm excited to hear from Alma, and while he says that some of his topic is dry, I beg to differ, and I'm excited to hear what he has for us today. Welcome, Alma.
Thank you, Carrie. And I recommend IKEA dishes. At least my kids are good with IKEA dishes.
Yes, I love that.
Thank you, Carrie, again. Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Asafash. I would like to take a few minutes to explain something that Asafash introduced earlier, and how the Afghan families and individuals it came a little bit different than most refugees. And the United States has resettled about 76,000 Afghan arrivals since last year. However, most of these arrivals have come as humanitarian parolees. And parolees are different from refugees, as Asafash alluded to. And they don't come with permanent status as refugees. They don't have a clear path to permanent residency or even a path to US citizenship. So most of these Afghan arrivals came as humanitarian parolees who were paroled in only for 2 years. And so with that, there comes a lot of uncertainty of what's going to happen to my family when these 2 years are up. So housing is important, health is important, but having a goal in mind, or at least a path of, am I going to be in the United States for the foreseeable future, has been weighing a lot on a lot of these Afghan families. So what are the legal options for these Afghan families and individuals right now? Some have worked with the US government or the International Security Assistance Force for about a year or more in Afghanistan, which allows them to get a special immigrant visa in the United States. But not all have worked with the US forces. So unfortunately, again, majority of these families without any clear path to permanent residency or US citizenship have to rely on asylum. Asylum is essentially trying to become a refugee in the United States. Right now, about 4,000 asylum applications have been filed in the United States. But because the asylum process is very difficult and long, only about half of these cases have been adjudicated and decided, and many of them have delayed decisions. The good news is that over 90% of the cases that have been decided have been positive and have been granted asylum. But there's not a lot of capacity to adjudicate these cases very quickly. Another sore point with asylum is that most applicants have to apply for asylum within 1 year. Many of these families have been here over a year. The capacity in the United States to help them apply for asylum and obtain asylum protection, there was not enough capacity. And so many of these families have been waiting more than a year. Fortunately, there are exceptions for these families that they can apply within 2 years of the humanitarian parole status. However, there's no guarantee that they will win asylum. And so there's no guarantee that they will be able to get their permanent residence or even become a US citizen. I was in an asylum interview yesterday for a single mother with 2 daughters. And just the difficultness of the interview, which is over 2 hours, the asylum officer asked the mother if she had served any tea to the Taliban, meaning that if she had, that might have made her ineligible for asylum just for serving tea. And so these interviews are very difficult. And so it's a very difficult process. Another issue that we have seen for these Afghan families and individuals are that they want to be reunited with families that they may have been separated during the evacuation. Some families have been fortunate to come together, but not all. Another option for the United States legally is to apply for them through a different, but the same name, humanitarian parole process, but it's a different process. Over 60,000 families have been petitioned for through this process, but only 500 have been approved since last year. It's really not a viable option. So even that, we are unable right now to reunite families in an efficient manner to have husbands and wives, children reunited with their families. I do want to add, as I'm going through some of these families and helping them legally to obtain some kind of legal status, apply for asylum, I've come across a few families, especially mothers, and how during the evacuation, one mother was pregnant, 9 months pregnant. And I don't know, Asafash had us doing this exercise at the beginning, just imagining what that's like. But as I met with these families, I just imagined the resiliency these families have, the mothers had, to be 9 months pregnant and to travel. Another mother had a new infant baby and evacuated with her family, with an infant, and how difficult that would have been, but how resilient they are once they're here. There is a solution to some of this legal problem, is that in August 9th, the United States has passed in the Senate and in the House a bipartisan bill called the Afghan Adjustment Act. The Afghan Adjustment Act, if it does and when it does pass, will eliminate this arduous process of applying for asylum and not knowing if their asylum cases will be approved. The Afghan Adjustment Act will allow a clear path for these Afghan parolees to obtain permanent resident status and eventually US citizenship, which will allow them to be not just safe in the United States temporarily, but continue to be involved and integrated some of the things that Daryl talked about earlier, and continue to bless the lives of all of us here in the Northwest as their children continue to be integrated, as they continue to give back to community, as they continue to help us learn what it's like to be a real human being here in the United States. And so with that, thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Daryl. And thank you, Asafash.
Alma, thank you so much for that. Again, more imagery around, trying to take ourselves out of the comforts of our home and our own space and shed a little bit of light as to what's going on with these individuals. It is not always easy, as Alma highlights, and most of the time it's actually painfully challenging and hard, with huge obstacles to overcome. So I'm thankful for you sharing the information and also showing us what that pathway to citizenship looks like, what the length of time is, and how sometimes that can even create a place of hopelessness because of the timeline and lack of resources available to people. I'm really thankful for your sharing, Alma. Next, we are going to welcome Ilyas, and he is going to share with us a little bit of his story. I won't go into it much, but the way that I get to interact with Ilyas and his complete joy is as a phenomenal grant writer here at LCS&W. So he'll talk a little bit about the work that he's doing with that as well. Welcome, Ilyas.
Thank you, Carrie. First off, well, my name is Ilyas Alami, and I'm a grant writer at Lutheran Community Services and a current refugee from the Afghan Refugee Crisis. I've been in US for almost a year, and in about a month, my 1-year anniversary in being in US would be around that time that 1 year would be completed. But before I talk about my personal story and my personal experience, I'd like to take this moment and this opportunity to thank everyone who is working and everyone who is supporting the Afghan refugees. I'm thanking on behalf of every Afghan who has made it to the United States, and without the generous support of American citizens like yourselves, it wouldn't have been possible. Without the generous support of resettlement agencies like Lutheran Community Services Northwest, without the support of people like Daryl, Asafash, Alma, Carrie, and many other people which is a very lengthy list of names, but it wouldn't have been possible for any of these people who are seeking refuge, who are trying to have a safer life for themselves and for their children outside Afghanistan after what happened in August last year when the country fell down. So I really appreciate how American citizens like yourself have come together, have opened your houses, have opened your communities to Afghan refugees, and have been hosting us. These new neighbors that you have gotten, I know there's still a very long way to get along, and there's still a long way to understand what they've been through. But the fact that you have generously opened your houses means a lot, especially to me and to many of us who are not in this webinar right now, but who share the same sentiment. I know Daryl talked about some of the challenges that Afghan refugees had, and that's mainly because many of these new neighbors, I'd like to call, they didn't make the decision to leave Afghanistan. They just had to wake up one day and get on one of those flights or find a way to get out of Afghanistan. Just a disclaimer, the few slides that are shared right now and the photos that are being reflected are not my own photographs, and that's mainly because I had to get rid of my whole photo archive. I had to get rid of everything that had a small resemblance of the work that I did in Afghanistan, and any backup that I had during the tumultuous trip that I made from central Afghanistan all the way to the north. Driving at night, the hard drive must have hit somewhere, and now it's hard to have access to those materials. So these photos are taken from the internet, and the reason I put these photos is to share, to give an imagery reflection of what happened to many of us after August, after the country collapsed. There was another time that there was another webinar that we talked about, and in that webinar I explained how nobody was aware of what was going on in Afghanistan. But this time I will take that story from the time that everything collapsed for a person like myself who was working with working in a non-profit organization in Kabul, and who was working mostly with youth, women, journalists, activists, and promoting human rights causes in Afghanistan. Once Taliban came in, I had to be confined to the walls of my home, mainly due to the fear that my presence in media and social media would put me in harm's way and put my family in harm's way. And my colleagues who worked with me. 14 months since collapse, Afghanistan has lost more than 5 decades of progress. 2 decades of those progress started from 2001 when U.S. troops came into Afghanistan. And these 2 decades, I'm a representative of that generation that started studying in 2001. I was in school when Taliban for the first time collapsed. And since 2001 up until 2021, in those 20 years, I studied school, I went to university. I came to US as an exchange student 10 years ago, and went back in Afghanistan and worked on numerous projects and programs. And this is the story of that whole generation. When Taliban took over, girls' education was completely banned. Activists, journalists, government officials of the previous government were attacked, were tortured, kidnapped, silenced, murdered. And anybody who descended the government was targeted. And many people had to choose, like myself, had to choose the path of leaving everything behind and finding the only way to get out of Afghanistan with a backpack, with one backpack myself and another one with my wife. That's all we came with. And then those 2 backpacks were mostly memories. It was the photo albums of our wedding, the hard drive that I said no longer works, and some of our documents that showed our credentials. My wife was doing a degree to become a dentist. She's no longer able to do that because we resettled here, and that dream is incomplete right now. And for me, the organization I run worked with 5,000 people, and now those 5,000 people, I don't know their fate, and I know many of them are still stuck in Afghanistan and very harsh situation. I left Afghanistan in October last year, so many of the things that the Taliban started to do with people, for instance, banning schools, limiting people's movements, checking mobile phones on the street, trying to locate people who worked with the government, who worked with civil society and media, and who worked on US projects, were some of the experiences I felt myself. I was one night in the middle of the night at 12, I received a call from a colleague who told me that their neighborhood has started, the Taliban has started night raids in their neighborhood. And that's when I decided to completely wipe off my computer from anything that connected me to my past work. But little did I know that the office that we used to run all of the equipment from, that office was also in the house. So it was hard to get rid of everything, to get rid of an identity that I worked so hard to build over 10 to 20 years. I left Afghanistan and stayed in an overseas processing center in Qatar. And then from there, I came in Virginia. My wife and I, we came to military camp in Virginia. And from Virginia military camp, we were there for more than 2 months. And then in January 22, I resettled in Portland, Oregon. In March, my journey started with Lutheran Community Services as a grant writer. During these more than 6 months, 7 months that I've worked as a grant writer for Lutheran Community Services. I've been involved in more than 20 projects and more than 20 applications that we've done for different government and foundations. It's seeking support for programs that I personally feel very connected to, although I'm not in the forefront of providing support, programmatic support like Daryl, Asafash, and Alma are doing. But I am in the background, mostly doing work with these fine people on designing programs that provides assistance and support to refugees, and not just Afghan refugees, but Ukrainian refugees, which was the second crisis that hit when I was still in the shifting phase of resettling in a new community in US. And to design these interventions and to write about them, I attest to one fact that these programs actually help people, and these programs actually provide support to people. Although the need far exceeds what services are, but these services are actually helping people become integrated and become engaged in their new lives in US, which is full of challenges for a person who has left everything and who is still in that trauma and that shock of leaving their home country behind. I will end my discussion around here, and I'm open to any questions. Again, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you very much for having me.
Ilias, thank you so much for sharing your story. I will try not to cry again, but it might happen, folks. We're obviously live and real here. Being able to look at the people who are coming into our country as new neighbors is such an incredible sentiment. And I love being able, if you can wrap your arms around that, having a good group of new neighbors is absolutely amazing. Something that you said about your wife's educational journey, about incomplete dreams. Gosh, I'm going to do it. I'm sorry, guys. Just makes, it touches, all the pieces of my soul, thinking about how many incomplete dreams are out there, and how you're actually helping to make them happen. Ilias, it's great to have you on the team. That's for another time and another day, but I just want to thank you for your incredible work that you're doing as well after such a long, harrowing journey here. We are going to move into our question and answer time. But as we do so, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. Not a single one of them has extra time in their schedule outside of their typical very, very high hourly work week. So Asafash, Daryl, Alma, Ilias, thank you so much for your time and for being so thoughtful as you reported out to our community about what's been done during this extremely difficult time. I can say that your leadership for all four of you has been absolutely incredible during this period. So thank you for making time for us. And now I'm going to start reading some questions that we've got here. Let's see. This is a good one, and I'm gonna just cover it real quick so that we don't go down into too far of a rabbit hole of the Ukrainian refugee crisis, which Ilias talked about. We do have a webinar that is going to cover everything that we're doing, struggles, challenges, successes with that crisis. And that is on November 17th at the same time, noon to 1. So those invitations to join us will be coming out in the next few weeks or so. It's about 4 weeks out. So I would love for folks to join us as you have questions about the Ukrainian crisis. But for today, we're focusing primarily on the Afghan refugee crisis and giving each their own due time. So hopefully that helps with some of the questions. One question, and I'm not sure who's best to answer this, so you panelists let me know if you'd like to take this one. how will we be able to reunite the refugees we've already resettled with their family that's still stuck in Afghanistan?
Hey, Carrie, I think I can help with that. I did type some answers out on that, but I think that's one of the biggest difficulties, trying to reunite families very quickly. Because, you know, families, we've been part of this COVID pandemic, and we know a little bit personally of what it's like to be separated from loved ones, especially extended family members. But just imagining what it would be like to be separated from your wife and your children. And we don't really have a very good answer to reuniting them very quickly. One of the options I mentioned is about humanitarian parole that allows us to apply for family members overseas and help them come here. And it's supposed to be a quick process, but it's really non-existent. About 60,000 people have applied for humanitarian parole for family members overseas, and only about 500 have been approved. And this is within over a year. And so since about 14-month period, the US government obtained about $20 million in all these filing fees and have not processed many of them. The real viable option, which is not acceptable, but the other option is to be able to apply for asylum, win asylum, and then apply for their family members. We're talking years. These are not days, not even months, but it could be years. So there's not a very good option right now. More reason for us to be advocating for the Afghan Adjustment Act, which already has been introduced, bipartisan bill, both in the House and the Senate. This will allow people to, one, have an idea where their legal status will be. They have a path, and also be able to reunite families as quickly as they can. And so I don't have a very good answer, but the answer is unfortunately inadequate. But we definitely want to be reuniting families as quickly as we can.
Thank you for that, Alma. I appreciate that. And if you are looking to help support the Afghan Adjustment Act, we have listed in the chat a way that you can contact your senator in your area where you live. So we would love that additional support on the broader scale if you're able to and have time. This next one is prime for lunchtime. How about food issues? Are there local markets that provide items that are familiar to the arriving Afghans? Daryl, maybe you could talk about the halal markets up in Kent.
There are halal markets, and we are working on getting some agreements with those markets to set up so that our agency can be invoiced for at least the first few initial purchases of halal food for our clients. We're working on setting them up, but there are markets. There are Muslim communities who are already established here. So wherever people go, they find their own food, and there are markets. Yeah.
I'd say a side note to that is sadly it's not as close as the Albertsons down the street, which is half a mile from my house. So most of these folks do have to travel a little bit further of a distance to find a culturally appropriate food. So it is a challenge for sure. Good question. Asafash, this one might be for you. Someone is asking for us to talk a little bit more about the community-based mental health services that we have for our Afghan refugees.
Sure. So the behavioral health trauma-informed care that Lutheran has been provided over years is really specifically taught, really working around counseling is a very stigmatizing conversation. And so it's, what we do is really provide culturally appropriate language specific support around wellness in general. But it is provided in a context of community-based rather than an individual. We do have individual services for people who need them, but really have this broad base of conversations around wellness. I mean, there's trauma that has happened in their lives. It's not a personal trauma, it's a community-based trauma for people who've just left war and come through, so it takes a lot of adjustment process in that, and individual therapy is available for people who need it and who get there through this different processes. But the community-based mental health process is really, I'm a mental health clinician myself. I am from Ethiopia, and we have very different concept of what wellness looks like in the individual context of mental health. In the Western model was different. So really kind of combining those two pieces. But I think the move to this community-based and move has been just fitting for many cultures that really have to adjust to a new way of living, process trauma and group, community-based, with language, with peer support, people who've had similar experiences with them. We have a robust peer support training that we provide all the time at Lutheran. It's grown to really include many, many languages. So the community-based wellness is adjustment, finding clear pathways of adjustment from trauma to, to survive the adjustment through survival and to thriving. And it takes time, and it mostly happens in community spaces with, and it's not just in an office setting, it is in communities. It could be in a mosque, it could be in churches, but it happens where people live and find their community. So, but we're part of that. We do it in an office if we need to, but I think our outreach has been just amazing in terms of really seeing the difference. People want to come to group settings, and we combine so many different things around that. It's not that really kind of heals the mind, and trauma does never go. It's never gone away, but it's just really kind of managing it and being able to adjust. You don't lose a country and become whole, anytime. You just manage to live with it. So, and raising children in this community is also a very, the adjustment of that process is really difficult for all. So we do have some support for youth and their communities and the youth community in general. But community is like healing happens when you're with a mentorship relationship with an American friend or community, but our programs are really informed by the community that we serve, and really kind of meeting people where they are. We don't build a program and then put the people in there. We have listening sessions, process all of this to really kind of provide, what they need and what they can take out of that. So, and it's train the trainer model, really. Peer supports are trained to do these things. It's a really beautiful marriage between all these different cultures and what we have to provide in terms of the American model, the Western model. We don't discount any of that, but I think it happens in communities, which involves everybody in the community. Wellness happens in communities. I hope that answered your general question, but and we're, we have more information if you need it.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Asifash. The piece that I have loved seeing come out of this crisis is how our programs have shifted. They've listened, highlighted a hole or a need or a challenge or a situation, and they've swooped in to have it covered before we can ask, what are we, on my side, what are we going to do about this? There's already a program created. Moving forward, there's already participants. It's been beautiful to see happen, and a very holistic and realistic model that's now absolutely our norm. So I appreciate the additional explanation. Okay, we've got about 3 minutes, and I want to respect everybody's time. So this next one I'm going to take to wind us out. What is the greatest need, and how can someone donate? Our needs vary by program and location. The best way to find what are most urgent, in-kind or stuff needs, is through our website, so lcsnw.org. You can go on there, you can see wish lists as far as Amazon. We've got them in the chat here. And then you can also see what welcome kits are needed at the time. So things that help people get set up in their homes. Some other things that I know we're always needing right now, again, as far as tangible item pieces, would be beds, bedding, and cell phones. Those are like the top 3 things that we just cannot keep enough of. And something that's really unique about our in-kind donation process is as soon as we get a bed, it goes to a family within probably 24 to 48 hours. We have 0 storage at all of our locations, equaling about the size of a very small, maybe European 1-car garage. So we do not store stuff much. We keep it moving and we push it out as soon as we get it in. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about tangible in-kind donations. Of course, some of the other pieces and challenges that we've highlighted today around food and transportation and housing and legal support all take money. They take our highly skilled humans or an item that we can't just give in kind. Sadly, our rent folks will not take a bed in exchange for rent, or else we might be able to do a little swap-a-rooney every once in a while. So please think about if you're able to support fiscally, that's great. Yes, we've worked a little bit with Habitat for Humanity. I just saw a question pop up, as well as the Northwest Furniture Bank. And so those are ongoing partnerships in all 3 of our communities, I believe. The Northwest Furniture Bank is only in Vancouver and Tacoma, not in Portland. So it just varies who our community partners are. But our need is incredible. We had a family of, I think it was 13 that arrived a couple of weeks ago, and we needed beds. And we had like 48 hours to figure out beds, 13 beds. And so Habitat is unable to provide us that quickly, but they have been a great community partner for us. So great suggestion, John. Other ways that you can support, again, are found online, but there's opportunities for volunteering. There's opportunities for engagement. And then, of course, we're really thankful that you're here and just expanding your knowledge and what you know about this situation, what you know about LCS&W, and hopefully you can walk away today feeling like you spent your lunch hour in a really productive way. Again, we're at 1 o'clock on the nose. Want to thank all of you who are here, who have joined us, who are supporting our efforts as we take on this continual crisis. And again, deep thank you to our panelists who took time out of their ridiculous schedules to be here today for this purpose. So thank you all. Have a really wonderful rest of your day. Please stay safe with all the smoke outside. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And if not super soon, then November 17th at lunchtime, so we can hear more about the Ukrainian refugee crisis as well. All right, have a great day, everybody.